Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Blood Brothers podcast. Tonight we are a Sean down, but we are a Rob up.
Hello there.
Quite good, isn't it? And we're another Rob up because we're thrilled, absolutely thrilled tonight that our guest is Robert Crais, author of the Elvis Cole and Pike series. Hello, Robert.
Chris and Rob, it's great to be here, man. I'm really excited to talk with you.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This represents, I think it's fair to say, Chris, quite the coup for us. So
yeah,
thank you very much for joining us. We're excited people tonight.
Well, you know what? Let's just all bag it and go out and grab a pint somewhere.
Oh, I'm down. I'm definitely down for that. We could do this from a pub somewhere, couldn't we? This would work.
Yeah.
No, we could. Only I'm what, 5,000 miles away from you.
Small details, Robert.
I know.
Minor details. Oh, in spirit, man, that would be amazing. But how are you doing today? You okay?
Doing great. Yeah. Looking forward to this. Winding down the U.S. tour. It's just winding down. So I'm back in Los Angeles now. But it's been a really great experience and really gratifying to meet so many readers and, chat with them. It's been 3 years and plus the pandemic and Lord knows what other chaos. So here we are.
Absolutely amazing.
Please, can you tell the readers about your newest novel, Racing the Light?
It's an Elvis Cole novel. It's the 19th Elvis Cole novel, my 23rd book altogether. And it's, like all my books, it's a mashup of, it's a detective novel, thriller, procedural, etc. It's an Elvis Cole novel. In it, a woman who's a little, we might say, odd, comes to Elvis Cole and says her son is missing, and she believes he's been kidnapped. But it's not the usual kidnapping because she believes, and she absolutely believes it, that her son was kidnapped by the Men in Black and is probably being held in Area 51. And one of the things I love about Elvis Cole, the character, is, of course, she might so easily be dismissed and laughed out of his office. But Elvis recognizes that the fact of it is this is a mother whose son is missing. He doesn't need to know the details. This woman is in pain. Her son is missing. So he agrees to try to find Josh Schumacher, her son. And of course, what he soon learns as he gets beneath the layers is that something very real and very awful is happening. And he's in a race against time to find Josh and do what he can to help.
It's absolutely brilliant. One of the reasons, there's so many reasons why I love this series so much, but that you mentioned the word procedural, but it's really a loose framework, isn't it? It feels like for these guys to, the law is there, but there's a flexibility in this that I really, really love, and it keeps me guessing. It means that I can never find anything to do with this stale remotely. So keep them coming, please.
I intend to. Listen, I love these guys, meaning Elvis and Joe. I love them. These characters. I've devoted my life to writing them. Jesus, it makes me cringe to say this, but they've been in my head now for 35 or whatever it is years. And I really actually enjoy spending time with them. And the only way I truly get to do that is when I'm sitting here at this very machine and writing them, creating them. So I can't see doing anything else, and I'll just continue to write the books forever until someone pops one in my head.
And it would also be remiss of me, I think, while I've got you here, Robert, to not say that I think the Monkey's Raincoat is like a cornerstone for me in what it is I'm trying to do. Not in terms of I just mean in terms of pure inspiration. That's all. I just thought that book is just absolutely stunning, and I've reread it a few times. It's just well, it's like occupies a special spot in my heart. I've got 2 copies.
I appreciate that, Rob. No, you know what? This thing that we do, we're all writers here. I think at the base of it, I mean, I can't speak for all writers. We're all different, right? But it's art. However crassly we feel about it, and the whole idea is to reach out and touch another human being, and maybe in a way be touched back. But it's about that collaboration, that actually connection with another person. So when you say something like that, or anyone says something like that to me, as they will to you one day about your own work, it really does mean a lot, because it gets to the core basis for why we do what we do.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I always feel like I make a fool out of myself by telling people that I admired, like, "Hey, that book you wrote was unreal," you know. And I've always now I'm just at a point like, look, life's too short. I just want to tell people that if they did something that really affected me in a really positive way, I want to tell them that, you know.
I think that's cool, man. That's great. I do too, by the way. You know, when I meet people, I'll tell you, I met one of my favorite, and sometimes my favorite writers was Elmore Leonard. And though I had crossed paths with Mr. Leonard over the years, it was a long time before I actually got to meet him. And I met him at a literary festival in Italy, of all places. And when I saw him, he was standing in the bar when I arrived, and I just went, honestly, totally fanboy. and I didn't know what to say. I walked over to him and I introduced myself, and I told him how much his work meant to me. And you know what? Maybe I felt embarrassed when I was doing it, and certainly nervous, because he was, after all, Elmore Leonard. But you know, I think it's important to do things like that.
You've helped me out a lot there, because I've had those fanboy moments. This is what's great about this writing community as well, isn't it? That there is an appreciation, isn't there? And there is such support for each other. That's what the writing community has meant so much to me and helped me so much in the initial stages of my career. But the chance to meet these people, meet these authors like we're doing tonight, and then to actually have that conversation with them, it's to cherish.
It is. It's great. It's cool that you guys do this, and I'm happy to participate.
It's great to have you.
I will never forget as well that within about 3 seconds of knowing you, Robert, you said, "Let's go for a beer." I will never forget that.
the next time I'm over there, let's do it. Let's get
right. Let's do it, man. This is the done deal.
Manchester's getting hit. With Racing the Light, it's easily one of my books of the year. Like, I flew through it and absolutely loved it. And something not just in this book, but that sort of leaps out. I mean, obviously Elvis and Joe were like these massive characters, but the characters that appear in each book are just so memorable. And even in this one, I mean, there are two girls that sort of are lying on some grass and they have a quick chat with Elvis. But even it feels like you've spent so long getting them right. I was just wondering about how you go about creating character after memorable character.
I spend a long time getting them right. All the characters in the books, as I write them, even the smallest roles, are not knockoffs. I mean, they serve a purpose, and they have to be in my head when I'm writing them. They have to come alive, and they have to be in some way memorable. And of course, there's different devices for creating that. But I try to make any encounter you have with a character in any of my books memorable, meaning you find it interesting. Because if it's not interesting, by definition, it's then boring, and I don't want that. So it's important to me to try to dig deep and look at characters from different angles. To give readers something to love, about something to love on each page, and to me that's an important self-measure of whether or not I'm doing my job the way I need to do it.
Yeah.
Really, really interesting. Can I take that same question, or a similar sort of vein of question over to research. I mean, how far do you dig, Robert? Do you dive, you take a topic and you get to the core of it, or like, what about the minutiae as well of the worlds that you create here? How do you go about creating this in terms of research?
I do a lot of research. Research is way more fun than writing. I do. Of course, it depends on the topic.
Yeah.
If there needs to be a lot of detail due to the characterization or due to the story necessities, then of course I'll do more research. And research almost always begets ideas. I mean, it's and some topics, some books require more research than others. But I've never been disappointed by research, and I think that's with the one proviso that at some point you actually have to start writing. You can't allow research to be a delaying tactic, no matter how much fun it is. So you self-edit. You say, okay, I have enough to do what I need to do. Sometimes I retro research, like if I'm in the throes of writing, I may actually just fabricate something if it's minor, and then after the scene is finished or at a later point in the process, then I'll go back and do the research and make corrections. That's a little trick. Actually, it's called being lazy. The invariably, I've actually gotten entire books from research. And let me give you one example. I was writing my 8th novel, which was a book called L.A. Requiem, and in it, I created a character of an LAPD criminalist. And I had not done much research in the way of that before. So I dove in and began researching criminalists and the Scientific Investigations Division, as it was then called here in Los Angeles. And I arranged through the police department to go to where SID was then housed to meet criminalists, see the labs, all that kind of stuff. So I do that. When I arrived and was in the parking lot, I also saw that there was an entire row of vehicles that said Bomb Squad, because at that time, SID shared its facilities with LAPD's Bomb Squad. And as I was getting the criminalist tour, I literally, I got to see all the Bomb Squad stuff. The armored suits and a lot of their techniques. And by the way, in the Bomb Squad headquarters here, then they have, training bombs, literally devices, literally everywhere. They're even hanging from the ceiling and stuff. And they use these things to practice de-arming bombs. So they let me put on the suit, it weighed 90 pounds. I had never had any interest in the Bomb Squad. And I came around a corner with the sergeant who was showing me around, and I came face to face with this LAPD bomb technician, but who was female. And of course, she was smaller than the bomb techs that I had seen. She was the only woman on bomb tech they had at that time. And I was immediately struck. I in retrospect, 5'4", 120, something like that. The first thing that occurred to me is she puts on the 90-pound suit and walks out there and does this same thing. And how different is that? She weighs 120 and she puts on that 90-pound suit versus a 220-pound male bomb tech who does the same thing. And right then and there, I had my next novel, which was a book called Demolition Angel, and it absolutely grew out of the research I was doing for LA Requiem. That's happened multiple times.
Absolutely incredible. And I love, that's given me a little bit of heart as well, because that thing that you mentioned about what you said was being lazy, like I'll go back later. Like only recently I'd put in a draft, because what I do is I disable internet searches while I'm writing, so that if I'm in the flow, I'm not going to then get, hey, why not look at this? And then they're coming out of a rabbit hole 4 hours later, that kind of thing. So, but I'd put insert rad war medals here and forgot to take it out of the first draft that I submitted. So, yeah, bit of a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, but you know what? That stuff happens.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that I make bonehead mistakes all the time, Rob.
Thanks, man.
We're in the same boat.
So when the beer happens, the first one's on me, man. All right.
Okay, right. You have the first. I got the second.
Hey, we got to
follow up with the third.
I'll take that.
And this is becoming a night.
You mentioned LA Requiem there, and that was I read on your biography. That was your sort of breakout book, I believe.
Yes.
The 7 that came before it, did you feel like you were getting towards that place, or did it feel like you were sort of treading water a bit, or did you know that this was going in the right direction?
I hoped it was going in the right direction. When I first started writing the books with the Monkey's Raincoat, they were in the classic, Chandlerian paradigm for this book. So, right, everything first person point of view of the detective. You get the entire world from the detective's point of view, which, by the way, I love and respect. But I had these two characters. I had Elvis Cole, of course, my main character and the narrator, but I had his partner, Joe Pike. And I knew from early on, from actually the Monkey's Raincoat, and then each subsequent book, that Joe was such a great character. I knew a lot of his background. I wasn't conveying it in the stories, but I knew what it was, and I was inspired by it, and more and more wanted to write about him. And so I did kind of work my way up through the books, the first, I guess, 7 books, to that place where I could. Part of it was that I began to feel constrained, not just with Joe, but really with the whole of what I call Elvis Cole's Los Angeles. If we're painters, we have colors on our palette, and I wanted more colors. So when I got to the point of feeling confident enough to change palettes, which was LA Requiem, I just decided to go for it all the way around, and I radically changed how I approached the books. All the others were first person point of view. LA Requiem was everything. Elvis's first person point of view, Joe Pike's third person point of view. It was flashbacks. It was other characters, multiple storylines. So the canvas was much, much broader. And I will tell you, at the time, I was terrified by doing that. I did not write the book with a sense that this is going to be the greatest book ever, and look at me, look at this wonderful thing I'm doing. I was very scared all the way through the process. I didn't know if I could pull it off. And then it was so different from the traditional form that I actually was concerned that A, my publishers wouldn't want to publish it, and B, the fan base that I had developed at that time wouldn't accept it because it was too different from the earlier books. But it worked out. It was a frightening experience, but it was a very, very rewarding experience. And then when my publisher saw it and they loved it, and and then it was embraced um, by the fan community. Um, it it did very well. It was the first of my books to become a New York Times bestseller. So it was my breakout book in that way too.
Amazing. What a story.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and inspiring too as well. With that almost like the way you described it there, it felt a bit like you were describing the books prior, like an apprenticeship in a way. Doing the hard yards almost. At the same time, to get to that point where right now I can really move forward, possibly.
Well, it certainly was growth. I mean, each of the books before that was the book I wanted to write.
Mm.
Um, I don't see them. I mean, looking back, or even then, I didn't see them as being lesser. Those were the books I wanted to write in the way I wanted to write them at that point in my life. But with each subsequent one, I just felt that there was more to be had.
Yeah.
And the only way I could get to Joe was to be with Joe in the scenes I wanted to depict. In other words, I could have related to those moments in Joe's life by having other people, talk about them in a real time sense. And here's Elvis kind of relating what Elvis knows, but that I don't think would have been as good or as interesting. And in many ways, well, not in many ways, in the way I think it would have been shortchanging Joe. For us to really understand why Joe Pike is the way he is, we had to be with Joe in those moments throughout his life, because they are core and formative moments in his development. And that's really because, I guess you could say Joe put a gun in my head and said, do this. That was the survival was the motivation.
It seems like, when you're getting characters right when they're wanting things more from you, as the writer, when they're guiding your hand a lot more, and sometimes yes. saying, hey, put me in here, I want to be involved here.
I'll tell you, I'm going to be very careful whenever we're talking about Race in the Light, because I don't want to do spoilers, but there's an Elvis, Lucy Chenier subplot in the novel. Lucy wants to see Elvis, so Lucy and Ben come to Los Angeles. And for readers who don't know the backstory, Elvis Cole meets Lucy Chenier in my fifth novel, Voodoo River, and they quickly fall in love. And that develops over a couple of books. And then, in fact, in L.A. Requiem, she actually, by that point, they're in love. They want to commit to each other in a larger way. She's living in Louisiana with her son. So she uproots her life and she moves to Los Angeles. And over the course of that book, L.A. Requiem, and then the following book in the series, which was The Last Detective, some very bad traumatic things happen. And Lucy decides that for Ben's safety, she can't remain in Los Angeles, and she can't have Elvis Cole in her life. She needs to take Ben home to heal, and they move away back to Los Angeles. She doesn't want the violence that she believes that follows Elvis to be part of her son's life or her life. Well, Elvis continues to love her, and then through the following books, they're apart, they're estranged. That's her call. It's not Elvis Cole's call. He wants to be with this woman. He still loves her. And yeah, during those times, he dated a couple other women. I'm sure she dated some men. But he's still in love with her, and he loves Ben like a son. And now, in this book, Racing the Light, I decided that I wanted her to return in a way that would open a door for Elvis. So I had this in my head. I'm a big outliner. I've been this way ever since Monkey. I figure as much out as possible beforehand. I do an enormous amount of preparatory work before I begin writing the book. So in my head, I had it all figured out. I knew what I wanted to do, and wrote the story as I had originally envisioned it in the first draft of Race and Light. And by the time I finished the book, because I just wanted Elvis to have this moment of happiness. I wanted Elvis, I thought, do this, give him this happiness. So they were all happy scenes. And by the time I got to the end of the book, writing it, I knew I wasn't being honest with these characters. I recognized as I wrote the scenes, I said, these people have a history here that you are not dealing with honestly. They've been estranged for all this time. And what comes with that? Even though Elvis still loves her, even though she has her reasons for returning now, which are revealed in the book, what comes with that estrangement and that distance? You know, there's anger here. There's a degree of resentment. There's a degree of fragility, none of which I was dealing with in those first drafted scenes, but I knew I needed them. So literally when I got to the end of the first draft, I just started rewriting the whole thing. And the scenes that now appear in the book between them, and in fact, their storyline is much different than the one I wrote in the first draft. Why?
Wow.
Because I listened to them, because I knew when the things I, the writer, was making them say were false. They wanted to say something else. So I went back and I let them say it. Listen to your characters, because when they start to talk to you, you'd be a fool not to listen.
Oh, that's blown my mind. Like in terms of how good that advice is, because there are a few things recently in my work where I've struggled because I've not been doing that. Has helped me so much. I could now, and now I can think of that. Like I can't wait to get back to it and look at where I've not listened to them, or where, you know, because I've like been trying to force a particular narrative or force a particular story on a situation that the history of it possibly hasn't earned.
Well, that's a good way to put it. I mean, listen, you can bend rebar, bend steel, right? You can force it and shove it all you want, but it actually wants to set in its natural course. I mean, look, we can't get too mystical here. As the author, you are in control. But what I've found, at least in my work, that there is a core truth to the story you're trying to tell, to the who the characters are, and the whole process of writing from the beginning to the finished product is you trying to uncover what that truth is and be honest with it. Because once you know what that core truth is, that actually guides everything else, and it makes what you're doing so much more real. That's the value in what we do. Now, I try to do as much of that as I can in my outlining phase. And all writers are different. Some people write by the seat of their pants. Some people are outline. You know, there's a million different ways to do this stuff. There's no right or wrong. But, you know, this is the way it works for me. And I made a mistake here. Even after 23 books, I make mistakes by writing that original inspired storyline, but the characters actually woke me up, which is great, because now I think I'm so proud of this. Now I'm like totally jazzed by I'm totally jazzed by what happens between them in this book, and the thoughts I'm having about future books.
That's so great. And this just slightly harks back to an earlier point you made, that about taking a leap of faith. Like LA Requiem was a leap of faith. When we do something and we sit down to try and take a leap, like bringing these characters back after certain, to put them in the close proximity to each other after such a long period, that there is a leap of faith to that. Now, a leap of faith in lots of other professions is like, shall I do this? Yeah, let's do that. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try something else. For us, it's months long process. It could take months and months and months of working something out, and only to get to that situation you were in where you're like, well, it didn't work. I got to go back and do it again. It's crazy.
It's a beast. It's a beast.
Yeah.
What we do is glacial. I mean, it's not like knocking out a short story, right? Or you might spend a couple of weeks or a couple of days even on a short story. If it fails, oh God, I mean, this thing, you're committing months of your life, maybe even years. So that's, but you know what? There's only one way to do it. You roll up your sleeves and you do it. And if you have to redo it, you redo it.
Yeah. I love it. There's an author over here who we've had on, Gillian McAllister, and she throws away every first draft. Just throws it, every word of it. That's unbelievable. And like
scary.
you're saying, like there's no right, no wrong way, and every way goes about it differently. But when you look at, like, when you try and explain what you do to other people, they look at you like, you are weird. And then I realized, yeah, you're right. Yeah, yeah, kind of weird. I won't want it any other way though. Sorry.
This thing we do is not normal. This isn't.
It's not, is it? It's not. So that's why these weekly recordings are a bit like therapy for Chris. Actually, it's like we'll chat with other survivors.
So that's what you guys are doing, right? This is like your therapy sessions.
This is like, honestly, I've saved myself a fortune in therapy bills just doing this.
Well, listen, that's what I've always told people, that writing is self-therapy.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always used my work to work out the world around me, issues, things that my own stuff. I put it in the books. You sort it out. You're maybe doing it a step away. You're having your characters do it for you. But if you can sort out their world, then you're sorting out your world too.
Yeah.
So.
Oh man, I sometimes on these I take notes on the right hand side, like things I want to remember, or things that this is. Oh yeah, listeners, I hope you've got your pens ready or to hand. Gosh, speaking of, we've had loads of. Well, we've had some questions, haven't we, Chris?
We've had a lovely question, from Louise Fairbairn. I hope I'm saying that right. She said, Cole and Pike are two of my favorite characters in crime fiction, and there are mentions that their friendship goes back many years. Would you ever explore that in more detail? Maybe going back to seeing them in action in a war zone. Thanks for writing this awesome series.
You're welcome. I'm glad you like it. I already know. I will absolutely show flashbacks of their relationship from earlier points in their lives. That's going to happen, to the point of them showing them in the war zone together. They weren't in a war zone together. Elvis was in the United States Army, and Joe was a United States Marine. So they didn't know each other there. They didn't meet until after their military service, when Elvis was an apprentice detective working for a man named George Feeder in Los Angeles, and Joe was a uniformed LAPD officer. They did meet at that time, and there's a very real possibility that I will explore that in flashback scenes. Just got to wait for the right story to do it.
Amazing. And I mean, Joe Pike seems like the most fun character to write in the world. I mean, Elvis Cole is cool, but the bits where like Elvis makes a crack and Joe just hangs up the phone or something, or it's just so like little tiny bits where it just leaps off the page. I mean, do you enjoy writing one more than the other?
No, not one more than the other. But I enjoy writing them both. Love writing Joe. Love writing Elvis. I love them for different reasons. the they both have these different personalities, and they play off each other in that way. So for me, they're both great fun. If Joe is so different from any other character that I can use his differences for so many different purposes. The humorous aspect, like the example that you just said, where Joe doesn't say very much, and he'll typically end phone conversations simply by hanging up. And sometimes he'll answer phone calls by saying nothing. He just answers, picks up. And those things can be funny. And I like there to be humor in my books anyway. Here's the awful self-serving truth. I write these books for me. I'm my first reader. Before I was a writer, I was a reader, voracious reader. And I have a little philosophy: write the book you want to read, which is what I do. These are the things that I enjoy reading. If someone else wrote Elvis Cole books, then I wouldn't have to write them. I would just read that. But since no one is, then it's up to me to put the mantle.
And we're very thankful that you do.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome, guys.
Could I go back just slightly further
Sure.
to Miami Vice?
Yeah.
So writing on Miami Vice, for me, Miami Vice, it doesn't matter what era I'm currently in. Miami Vice will always be the coolest. So how was working on that? Could you tell me, like,
it was cool? It was
yeah,
it was cool.
I could think it has to be, right?
I was actually writing Vice episodes freelance while I was writing Elvis Cole novels at the beginning.
Cool.
When I first started my career, I was a TV writer. I was a baby TV writer. And I did that exclusively for about 10 or 11 years before I decided I'd had enough of that and I wanted to write books, which always had been, I think, my ultimate goal. But what I would have to do, because I can only do one thing at a time. I know there are writers who can write 2 or 3 projects at the same time. That's not me. So I would, I wasn't being paid any money to write books, but I would take a big block of time, save up money from TV writing, and then go away and write a book. And then after the manuscript had been written, we'd be broke. So I'd have to run back to television and stack up some script assignments and write them as fast as I could to make some money so that I could then write another book. So in that early period, Vice was one of the shows I was writing for, and it was really cool. I mean, I was writing for that at that time. The Equalizer was one. It was just neat. And Vice was particularly fun. The writers were here in Los Angeles, and the production was in Florida. But at that time and era, like Don Johnson was like the coolest human being on the planet, and the whole vibe with the show's fashion sense,
I love it.
The show's aesthetic, the gorgeous shots. It was just an exciting thing to be a part of.
I still don't understand now why people ever have a go at the 80s for 80s style and fashion and culture. I don't understand it. I absolutely love it. Born in 83, so I was just like conscious of where this is my jam. It's like a very small child. This is awesome.
Well, you know what? It's 80s television is rolling nonstop 24 hours a day somewhere on the planet right now. It's never going away, so get used to
it. Well, I will. What did you think of the 2012? Was it 2012? No, it wasn't. Was it? It was earlier than that, wasn't it? Was it 07? The Miami Vice sort of up to date version, the movie with Colin Farrell. The movie, yeah.
You know what? I've never seen it.
Really?
Yeah, never saw it.
It's probably for the best.
Well, it's funny. I'd already moved on. And I had such fond memories of the original Vice, I was actually scared to see it. Scared's probably the wrong word, but maybe it was unfair of me to prejudge the film. But I guess I didn't want it to mess with my memories of the original and my experience on the original. So, you know, I don't know, Rob, if you tell me it's the greatest movie ever made,
No.
maybe I'll check it out. But
No, I think it's interesting as a companion piece, if you know what I mean. You know,
I understand that, sure.
yeah, nothing's going to get near the original series for me. Absolutely nothing. They could do it now as a period piece, and you're still not getting there. Don't don't even bother. Whereas yeah, this was interesting, but the vibes for me was completely different. And it was really sort of like the name was the closest thing, and the character names, that kind of thing, was the closest thing that they had between them. The DNA I didn't think was the same. It was like an estranged member of the family, which is, you know, by definition makes it kind of interesting.
I'll tell you, the Miami Vice pilot was written by a writer named Tony Yurkovich. It's one of the finest TV pilot scripts I've ever read. It's actually spectacular. And interestingly enough, Tony Yurkovich was a writer I worked with because he was a staff writer and producer on Hill Street Blues when I worked on Hill Street Blues, where he also wrote exemplary scripts.
Very, very cool. Nice. I don't, yeah, us, like, well, certainly like me living here in my Northern English town, just talking about the fact that you're doing Miami Vice and other stuff between Cole and Pike novels. I mean, it's the coolest conversation I've ever been involved with, frankly.
And can I ask about Hostage? Because that was one of your non-series books. And then it obviously got turned into the film with
Bruce Willis.
Yeah. Why did you feel like you needed a break from your series and just fancied something a bit different?
It wasn't a sense of feel like I needed a break. I came off of LA Requiem with the idea for Demolition Angel. You know, I already told that story. And while I was working on Demolition Angel, I just had the idea out of the blue of for Hostage. You know, the original notion for Hostage was the town sheriff, who's a former SWAT negotiator, Jeff Talley, ends up being the hostage negotiator because some crazy young bad guys are holding a family hostage in a house. And at the same time, bad guys are on the outside of the house wanting in. So Talley ends up being the hostage of the title. He's held hostage by the situation. And when I had the idea for that, I loved the idea for it so much that I wanted to write it. So it really wasn't a case of feeling I wanted to take a break from the guys. Yeah. It was a case of, I want to write this so badly, I'm going to write it. And that's how that's actually played out in all of my standalone books. I don't it's not like, oh, I'm tired of writing the guys, I want to, you know, take a break. It's that, you know, even like the 2-minute rule. I had this notion one day for Max Holman. I was doing research for something, for probably one of the Elvis Cole books. I don't remember precisely, but I happened upon the notion of the response time for bank alarms here in the U.S., at least at that time. And it literally was 2 minutes, which you know, bank robbers and cops know it too. But from the time an alarm is triggered, typically in most American towns, there's about, at least then, probably it's longer now, but a bandit had about 2 minutes of clean time to get away. And any time after that, the odds of being caught grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. When I had that idea, and when I had the idea of Max Holman and his situation in that book, that was the same thing. I immediately loved the character of Max Holman, even before I wrote him. I just in concept, like, oh man, I want to write this. So I wrote it. And ditto Suspect and, Canine Maggie, the dog. And I'm sure that's the way it's gonna play out for the rest of my career, right? I mean, I write Elvis Cole novels, but when some other idea pops up and sinks its fangs into my neck, I'm off and running. I'm driven to write it, guys.
Long
That's
way to
great.
continue. That is
Yeah.
great. We've got just as we've been writing, I've just had a message come to me from another writer called Robert Crais, who is a huge fan of yours, Robert. And he didn't know we were having a chat. He's just sent me a couple of questions now, if that's cool.
Sure.
That's awesome. Thank you. He asks that books can often deviate from the original plan as you write them, but what's the biggest mid-novel surprise you've sprung on yourself that wasn't in the original plan? Obviously, we'll be careful of spoiler territory and all that kind of stuff, but
Sure. Well, it sounds like Robert is asking if when you say biggest mid-novel surprise, I just probably the biggest is the one I just described, the Elvis Lucy story in Racing Along. That's the one that not only is, of course, it's freshest, but I don't think I've ever had one that large before, where I've literally had to go in and rewrite not only every scene that I had written, but throw out scenes that I had written and come up with all new scenes from an entirely different angle. In the past books, I think I'm pretty close. Again, there's always a lot of little adjustments, a lot of small, because I don't know all the details when I start. But I'm so gun shy of getting burned just by this example, and I'll tell you why in a second. That by the time I sit down and actually start writing, I have a very high level of confidence what the story is, what the character turns are, and what the character arcs are. So that, and if I've done all that preparatory work properly, which obviously I didn't do this time, but if I've done it properly, then that's the story I want to write, and that's the story I know is going to be. It's going to be real. It's going to happen for me. And so it almost always has. And here's the aside I was going to say. The reason I write this way, meaning the outlining and all the huge amounts of preparatory work, that's how we did it in television, right? I was either a freelance writer, I was a staff writer, I was I was a story editor, writer, producer, supervisor, blah, 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 all these titles. But in working with TV and movies, not the original spec script, but once you get involved in the system, the machine, there are steps that you have to follow, right? I mean, you come up with an idea, you pitch it to somebody, they give you notes, you write an outline, somebody reads it, they give you notes, you write a teleplay, someone write. There's all these levels. And one of the things I began, because that's where I started, that was all I knew. And I guess I convinced myself over my TV career that somehow this smacked of hack work. I had read, of all these writers and artists who, of course they didn't do it that way. They just started writing, and that's how an artist does it, right? You sit down at your keyboard and you kind of like your fingers hover over the keys, your eyes roll back in your head, you start to type, and oh my God, and then you get to the end, and this wonderful piece of artwork has appeared, right? The novel. So I thought that's how real writers are supposed to do it. So when I wrote when I stopped writing TV and decided to write my first book, which was not The Monkey's Raincoat, that's how I did it. And it was just horrible. I making it up as I went was frustrating, was awful. Everything about it was bad. But I'm stubborn, So I put that book aside, that manuscript aside, and now it's time to write another manuscript, write another book. Had a great idea for that book. But again, an artist simply starts typing and the story comes out. So I did that, and the manuscript was 550 pages, and it had a 500-page beginning and a 50-page ending and no middle. So I threw that in the trash. And then I said, okay, you've been up to bat twice, you struck out twice. Why don't you just do it the way you know works for you, which was the way I'd been doing it when I was writing for shows like Hill Street Blues and Miami Vice and all these other things that I'd written. And that's the way I've been writing it ever since, because when I figure it all out, just as if I were working in the studio system, it works for me. And it almost always works for me. And I've learned to trust the process.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, I love it. He also asks if it's all right. He's got a couple of short ones here. Any plans for more books with Pike as the main character instead of Cole?
Yes.
Great answer.
Yep.
And also, this is his last one. In a hypothetical mashup of your books and Harlan Coben's, who would win a fight between Joe Pike and Win Lockwood?
Is he trying to make trouble? Well, they'd probably sit down together, and Win would probably have a little brandy, and Pike would probably have a beer, and then they wouldn't say very much, or at least Pike wouldn't.
And then part ways, no violence at all, just a lot of cerebral violence, staring at each other, possibly. Yeah. Oh, cool, man. Chris,
we've probably run out of time a little bit.
Yeah,
it feels like we don't want to keep you, but I mean, what a chat, and what a series of books, and I mean, the answers that you've given tonight have just been so inspiring. I mean, we talk about inspiration every week, and I've just started writing something new, and what you've said tonight has really, really helped make me, I was excited about it already, but the things that you've said have just, I'm dying to get going. So thank you so much for an incredible hour.
Yeah,
it's been great. It's been terrific talking with you guys. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much for your time. What a gentleman, Robert. Thank you for everything. Appreciate it.
Those beers, you got that first one.
I've got the first one. Oh, I am holding you to that.
Do you have any plans to come to the UK?
Not in the near term, but I'm hoping mid to late spring I might come over.
Cool.
We'll keep an eye out. We'll keep an eye out for your signal.
I'll be straight in your emails when I see that.
and all the very best with the new release as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And we'll speak to you soon.
Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.